Hello and welcome to another edition of Pro Tips from Global News Alliance. I am Sam Ebersole, Director of Training for GNA. In this series, we interview working journalists who share their experience and expertise, and all of this to promote journalistic storytelling that will advance the kingdom of God. And today we're excited to have as our guest a reporter who is currently transitioning from his home in South Africa to the UK, Mr. Mark Roughton. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today and for your many contributions and reports that you've shared with Global News Alliance in recent months.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm very privileged to share with you today.
Awesome. Well, Mark, can you give us a little background about your career journey? I was looking at your CV, and you've had some time in education. You've worked in feature filmmaking, then you moved on to journalism. Kind of catch us up to how you got from where you were to where you are today.
It's been a very, very checkered journey. Plenty of new starts for me in my working career, which now spans roughly 34 years. But it's interesting for me that I started in the sort of marketing end of cinema as a cinema manager in South Africa. It wasn't something I intended. It was the job that came up and was available at the time. And over the years, I found myself moving from initially training and developing training material, both in secular work as well as within a children's ministry. And that evolved over time to actually being involved in children's entertainment. And then there came the point where we started getting involved in stage productions. I thought I would make movies and that would be my life. We got involved with our own independent production that we self-financed, remortgaged our home to do that. Didn't make any money, didn't sell it. But that was our film school. And certainly for me on the technical side, that's where my interest in editing and camera work was really sparked. Along the way, I've learned some sound principles and things and done some sound work on other films. But it really did kickstart our work in broadcast and my work in broadcast. Initially in South Africa, it was more in the documentary space for commissioned projects for our local national broadcaster. And over time, we got to a point where we were actually running a program for high school learners where we introduced them to the opportunity of producing a short film, which we would then crew with a professional crew and shadow them. And every single school that participated had the same resources, the same professionals assisting them. And it really brought out some exciting, budding young talent at high school or teenage age. And some of those, a good number of those filmmakers went on and actually managed to work in the industry after they'd graduated. So that was a very satisfying project. But again, one of those projects that is soft funded. It's the kind of thing you cannot guarantee that it'll carry on next year. And that left us kind of disappointed. But again, I found myself back in the news and sports side of things. And my breakthrough as a journalist was not something I was looking for. I was working here in Cape Town as the cameraman editor for a global news network. That was my appointed position. It was a full-time job, which was a rare sort of bonus for me. I'd been freelancing for many years. And I felt at one point the urge to stick my neck out and go off and shoot a package myself and just send it to my bosses and say, well, what do you think? And I stuck myself in front of the camera, did a very nervous piece to camera in that story, scripted it, shot it, edited, and sent it off. And that little step of faith opened the door for me to start reporting from Cape Town for other clients within our network. And so I had about 4 years of experience, and I still live with a sense of imposter syndrome is the phrase. But this idea that, I wasn't schooled in journalism, I've learned on the job, but I've been very privileged to be surrounded by mentors and seniors within the organization who have been very forthcoming and very willing to share expertise and to pass on the tips and the feedback that is necessary to improve your script firstly, and then also to improve edits before you actually deliver to a client. So a fairly long-winded answer, but that's how I've ended up where I am today. I'm back to freelancing now, but primarily still doing news-related work or news type of storytelling for non-profit organizations and occasionally some sports coverage as well.
Well, Mark, thank you for those encouraging words because, as you know, part of what we're doing at GNA is trying to train people who have no background, maybe have no higher education training at all, no professional training, but we're saying, look, you have tools at your disposal. You have a smartphone. You have knowledge about what's going on in your church, in your village, in your town, and you can become a reporter with just a little bit of training, and what they need is the courage to do what you did and step up and say, I can do this, and go out and do it.
It really makes a difference having somebody to give you feedback. I think that for me was the key. I was very blessed to have a head of global operations who really thought very highly of me, and was very, very patient and generous with my ignorance and the floundering that came with the first few packages that I ever put out. And I really would encourage people who are doing this for the first time or getting into it, or perhaps are like I did, moving across from a different form of communication or entertainment, for want of a better word. God doesn't often reveal much beyond the next step for us. And I think a lot of the reason behind that is because we'd probably back out and say, hold on, I'm not qualified for that, or I can't see myself there one day. And I do think the biggest support we can give is to be generous with our time, for those who are trying something new. And if you can find one or two people who are prepared to give you time, to give you honest feedback, and who are not intimidated by your intentions and your goals of stepping up and becoming stronger in your field, whether that's as a cameraman or a reporter or an editor or a one-man production house, which has tended to be how I've found myself here in Cape Town. The people are out there, and I would be very supportive of any network or organization that intends to help others get a step up. And that's why I'm so fond of this series as well. And I think it's fantastic. You never know what kind of gems you're depositing just by sharing your own experiences and your own thoughts, even based on the road you've walked.
Exactly. And we really are hoping to get to the point where we can connect journalists who are just starting out with more mature, more experienced, those who have been in the profession for a while, so that they can provide that kind of mentorship that you were talking about. That's one of our goals. But Mark, I also noticed that you have interest and expertise in CrossFit instruction. And I just think it's interesting. I've noticed that some of the stories that you've shared with GNA and with the world do have a component where there are maybe athletes involved or people overcoming physical challenges. How do you connect those two parts of your life, your interests and your profession?
Again, it's one of those things I find I'm very privileged. It isn't something that I would have premeditated and thought, oh, well, I have a specific interest in sports and I'm going to look for stories that lean that way. But the story I did about CrossFit Masiphumelele is a great example of people who are making a difference in lives. And it's not from the pulpit. It's from the gym, and it's from schools. I've been fascinated at how many different Christian organizations, for example, are involved in schools in the United Kingdom. I think it's an exciting time that we live in where there's opportunity to make a difference outside of church on Sunday. And I think coming back to our role as journalists, it's really powerful and important to be seeking out those stories. Revelation talks about how they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And what we do when we report the kind of stories we're reporting is we are sharing testimony. And we've got no idea what impact that has. We have no idea what encouragement we are sharing when somebody sees a story and relates to the person who's giving their testimony or the person who's come through something. And especially I found in the CrossFit space, there does seem to be many of these affiliates who are founded on spiritual Christian principles. They are in their communities looking to make a difference.
Well, I'm saying on that same track, you did a story recently about a young gal who was raising funds, I believe, for an orphanage, and she did it by swimming a treacherous distance from Cape Town to Robben Island, a notorious or infamous prison island off the coast. That was an amazing story, and your storytelling, I think, really helped the viewers experience that event. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into the making of that story, and we'll show some clips of it while you're talking about it, so that the viewers can be reminded of what you produced.
Thank you. This, for me, was a very special story, and to be honest, I was surprised that there wasn't much other media coverage of the actual day. This young girl is 10 years old. Part of that was perhaps that it was an unsanctioned Guinness World Record attempt, in the sense that the local swimming sort of recommendation is that it's not a distance to be attempted at that age. But she had actually already completed it in a practice run, and her heart was to do something to raise funds for this organization. So I knew in advance, obviously, I was going to be on the water. I would be on a boat, the support boat that was going with her. It's the upside of being the only journalist there. I had all the space to myself. It was just myself, the pilot of the boat, and Carly's mother. So I geared up for that with a regular camcorder. And I will say, in terms of cameras, I've had to accept that it's a matter of horses for courses. There are certain types of cameras that suit certain types of shoots best. There's a big move towards DSLRs and smaller, more compact cameras, and there's a lot that they can do that camcorders were uniquely able to do maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But having worked with a camcorder and working especially in a sports type of environment, it's like a wedding. You don't get to reset and take the shot a second time. But, I had the one camera on the boat for being able to zoom in nice and tight. Most camcorders now have very decent image stabilization. So even if you're on the water and it's choppy and you're up and down, you can get pretty stable shots without a tripod. The whole shoot was obviously handheld, but the real game changer for me in recent times has been using an action camera. Initially I brought it with me in the studio, but I actually started on a little monopod. I would mount it on here. And this can only, extend to about 1.2 meters, but add 1.2 meters to your own height, and suddenly you can get close to 3 meters height, to get a high angle. And on that shoot with the swim, I used a Rode boom pole, and this extends to 3 meters. And once you've got that fully extended and a waterproof camera on the end of it, the latest GoPros also give you the option of horizon leveling. So I had that engaged. And because of that, I was able at times to have the camera positioned really high above and give more of a panoramic sense. Because, I think it was 4 point something kilometers she had to swim. It's a very long distance. And you want to try to capture that from the boat. It's not very easy. Obviously, table mounting in the background really helped as a backdrop. But by being able to get a bit of elevation, it helps to create a sense of just how big and sparse the ocean is, with all of its risks. And so it was the first time I got to use it as much in a single shoot, but I was able to spend some time under the water, trailing behind them, trailing in front of them. That's herself and her support swimmer. As I say, having the camera above as well. The biggest challenge on the shoot was that when we reached the destination, we weren't going to be able to come ashore on the little dinghy we were on, because there was no jetty or pier there. So that's where I really had to rely on my camcorder and its 30 times zoom to try to get the finishing shots of her actually celebrating on the beach and doing cartwheels. So, a shoot like that, if it was a sports event, you would have a cameraman at the finish. You would probably have somebody at the start as well, and then a third person on the boat. But that requires budgets and things, which is a privilege few of us have these days. Very often you find you're in the field, you're on your own, and you need to do what you can with what you've got. I think what I would really recommend for any person who's filming is, as early as possible in your career as a camera operator, get into the edit suite and see how your shots are being used, because it really is the best way to get a sense of what is required when you're out there filming. And I knew I'm stuck on this little boat. We've got 2.5 hours, 3 hours maybe of repetitive motion, and I need to come up with a variety of shots to be able to do an interesting edit and fill 2 to 2.5 minutes of story time with those pictures. So, having been in the edit room and understanding what's required there, it gives you a checklist in your head that you might not have if you've never seen the edit process happen. But one of the things, it's a pet peeve for me, is very often there's a lovely shot, but there's no static beginning and there's no static ending. And it's a recommendation I've heard in our training as well. Even with a pan or a tilt, start with a static, finish with a static, and have your movement in between. But those 8 to 10 seconds either side or longer gives your editor options. So I was very, very grateful for how it all came out. On the day, I wasn't certain how every shot was looking. And I can guarantee there were a lot of shots that didn't quite work because once the action camera is underwater, you can't see what you're getting. And sometimes all I had was a pair of toes or a couple of hands or just nothing in blue water. But there's a lot of tech available to us today, and a lot of it is actually encased even in our smartphones that can actually go underwater for a while and get some footage. And I would encourage you to get creative and use your kit. Maybe not push it to its full limit, but if it can go underwater, let it go underwater. There's some lovely angles to be had, and it just enhances the experience for your viewer.
Wow. There was so much great information there. I'm not sure which one to follow up on first, but, your comment about learning to shoot in a way that is going to enhance the editing experience. I did a short video recently on shooting B-roll, and I actually made that as one of the points, shoot for the edit. And I realized as I was trying to teach that concept that's a hard concept to understand until you actually do it. So that's kind of how I concluded that segment was just shoot some B-roll and then edit it together and see what works and what doesn't work. And you will learn, as you have found over years of experimentation, if you will, that the way that you shoot your B-roll is going to make the editing process quite easy or impossible depending on how you shoot it. So that's the first bit of excellent advice. And then the bit about being creative. I mean, the idea to put your action camera on a pole and get high and get underwater with that on that particular shoot. Just a great example, being creative in the field and coming back with great shots. Now, somebody might say, well, I only have my phone. I don't have an action camera. I don't have a boom pole, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that, but there's ways you can be creative just by where you position yourself and your smartphone if it comes down to that. I mean, you don't have to have gear to be creative. You can be creative because you don't have gear, to be honest.
I absolutely agree. One of the best tips I received was many years ago. I wasn't the selected cameraman. It was a BBC filmmaker who was out in South Africa at the time, and he was short of crew. And I shadowed him for a couple of days. And to be honest, after 2 days or 3 days of shooting for him, I wondered if I was actually half qualified because there was so much meat that he'd obviously picked up in his years. And as I say, I haven't had the formal training. I've learned largely on the job. I've had the privilege of some workshops and some masterclasses along the way. But the one tip he gave me that always stuck was the power of three, saying, get 3 shots. And one of the filmmaking tips I picked up from narrative filmmaking, shooting a movie, in terms of editing was, if you can move 15 degrees off axis from the last shot. So if I was here and I got my first shot, if I can move the camera just 15 degrees and then change my framing, maybe zoom in or move a bit closer, it's not going to feel like a jump cut. But if I'm too close to that original position, it might feel like a jump cut, even though I've moved the camera. So there's a few tips that have just always stuck. And even when I'm doing news and it's hustle and bustle, I'm trying to make sure I'm moving, even if it's just 1 meter or 2 meters to my right or to my left. It allows for shots that will cut alongside that first shot, and at least 3 shots just to give yourself options. And I'm probably guilty of overshooting. I've got loads of clips on hard drives that will never see the light of day. But the news environment, daily news is a great pressure cooker. And you learn to shoot and make sure that you've got enough, because you're going to move into maybe 90 minutes to 2.5 hours of editing, and that little story has to be on air at 7 p.m. There's no room to go back and reshoot or get another shot you didn't get. So yes, that power of 3, get 3 shots that are related to each other. and at least you've got the option. If you've done really well, you might use all three, but at least you've got two shots that link to each other before you move to the next one.
Absolutely. Great advice. Are there any other tips that you've picked up over the years that might be relevant to a journalist just starting out, whether it's about writing the script or shooting the shots, or anything that you want to share with some of our viewers today?
There's many things that come to mind, and they're not all going to be relevant to everybody. I would probably say I was very fortunate. The second film I worked on, early days, back in 2005, the first sort of proper feature film that I was a crew member on, I worked as a boom swinger, and the guy who got me onto the job recommended that position because of the proximity to everybody else on a film set. The boom swinger is a guy who has the microphone on the pole and he's following everyone around. And this was back in the day where most of the sound was recorded from that primary rifle mic. Nowadays, I don't know, they might stick lav mics on every single actor because they've become so much more affordable, and you've got new tech with Bluetooth and everything. But the value and the importance of sound just cannot be understated, or overstated. It's so important to get good quality sound. And if there's any shoot I go on, sometimes I still work on sports shoots where it's a multi-camera event, and I'm just going there as an operator, and I'll be handed a camera to work with. I pack my lens pen, which I don't see very often in the field these days, the good old-fashioned pen with a duster on the one end and a little soft end on the other that you can wipe your lens down without damaging it. I've got my lens pen, and I've got a pair of earphones that I can plug in, and I can hear what the sound is doing. I was fortunate only once to have the experience where I could see on my camera's LCD that there were levels on the audio monitors, and when I got back into studio, those levels were just static noise, and the microphone hadn't been connected properly, and we had no audio from that interview. So I highly recommend, if it's at all possible, it's not easy with smartphones, but any DSLR you're using that has an audio output or anything with an audio interface with a headphone jack, plug it in and just have one in your ear so you can hear that you're getting sound there. There's a lot that can be rescued nowadays with software and post-production, but at the end of the day, you want to know that the sound you need is coming in. Obviously, it could ruin an interview if you're not getting good sound, but that's one of the areas where I find even good veteran cameramen or camera operators can still trip themselves up because they're not focusing on the sound, and especially if they've come from a cinematography sort of background or filmmaking where you used to have just a camera department and they only focused on picture, and then you had a sound department and they only focused on sound. And I used to get frustrated because people won't jump out of their little box or their little department to help you move something or rig a light because nope, that's not my job. And I get it in that it's also not something that they're accountable for. They don't want to get into trouble. But we're in a day and age where it's possible to be a one-man production house. And when you are a team, you need to collaborate and work together and cover each other. There's nothing wrong with asking, are you monitoring sound? Is the sound good? I think one practical tip I would add, I have a pair of these microphones that nowadays transmit via Bluetooth. They can record in the transmitter as well as sending a signal that you can record into your camera. But they've got a magnetic backing to them. And I've found it a lot simpler at events where there's a speaker and you're going to be filming the podium. It's very often quite easy to access one of the speakers and one of the PA system speakers and just slap your microphone on there, put it just to the side so it's not getting the full brunt of the volume. But often the speakers are right in front. There's not too much ambient noise around. And if I don't have access to the sound desk, I will plug a microphone there and hit record. And then on my camera, if you have the functionality, I will have a channel that is taking that feed straight from that speaker, and then a second channel to the fluffy mic or the onboard microphone of the camera, so that I'm also getting that as a safety source for sound. But sound is so valuable and so important, and it's tragic to not be able to use it in the edit. So yeah, many other things I could say, but I think I would love to hammer home the value and importance of sound, because it's probably very seldom that you get to actually work just in that department certainly as a journalist, as a video journalist. It's a rare opportunity.
Of all the things that can make a shoot perfectly unusable, audio is probably number one. Some failure on that front leads to more unusable footage, I think, than anything else. So great advice. As a reporter, is there anything you would say about the interviewing process or anything about doing stand-up to camera as a reporter? Tip for us journalists just starting out?
There's a couple of things I would love to share on that, especially in terms of access to sources. That was something I really struggled with here in Cape Town. Not being an established journalist, when you want to start interviewing parliamentary officials or city officials, or even experts in a certain field, those can be very, very tough gateways to break through. And often you may find yourself in a position where you would love to get a comment from authorities or from health services or from emergency services, and you just don't have access. My advice is to use Google and use the internet. And there are many, many reports available and many, many resources available that will present verified information, data, sometimes even quotations in that you weren't there yourself, you weren't perhaps in the interview, but you can access that information and you can work that into your writing. It's something that I appreciate from the journalism experience now, doing this kind of stories that we do with GNA, where you don't want to just be doing a promo for an organization or a church or a specific event. You want to be offering a balanced report, and you want to be reporting on, not just look what God did here, but the actual impact to the world, so to speak. So, for example, I edited a story about a whole lot of crusades that had taken place here in Africa in 2024. And in the one country, I just noticed from the snippets in the edit and the information in the brochures that the organization had released, a lot of eye injuries or eye issues and a lot of healings happening in that department. And so I went Googling for statistics about those sort of injuries and those sort of diseases within those countries. And I was able to find data that made the healing significant, in the sense of this is actually an issue. We might not think of glaucoma as an issue in a country that perhaps doesn't have as many cases. And so by digging a bit deeper and doing a bit of research, you can often find the information you'd like to be able to use that either supports or perhaps sometimes counters what your interviewees have told you. You want to try and have a balanced report. And sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded response, but there are resources available outside of being able to physically interview somebody yourself. And certainly as a start-out journalist, that's the place to look, because you don't want to just be a cheerleader for one side of a story. I don't think we're doing contentious stories most of the time, but you want to try to bring some balance. And more importantly, I think you want to illustrate to your audience what the bigger impact is of what has happened, what you're reporting on.
Wow. Well, that was some awesome and great advice for our journalists. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your expertise with us. And thanks again for all that you do reporting. I guess we'll be seeing more reports coming out of the UK and that part of the world, but we hope you get to continue to travel and tell reports about what God is doing everywhere. And like you said, it's not just puff pieces. It's not just PR. It's not just, let's see what good things are happening, but you have to tell the whole picture, and that involves doing some real journalism. So we appreciate journalists with integrity like you out there on the front line. So thanks again. This concludes another episode of Pro Tips, interviews with working journalists who are telling stories about what God's doing around the world. So we just encourage you to check out our website at gna.news for more information about Global News Alliance and how you can become a part of our team of reporters telling stories about what God is doing in your church, in your city, in your country, on your continent. So remember to subscribe to us on YouTube to receive notifications of future episodes of pro tips or other videos that we post. We also have tutorials on smartphone journalism techniques, and we hope to see you there. And until next time, may God bless you.